Hello, Luke. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So, Luke Moon, you are the executive director of the Philos Project.
Yes.
And we were just actually before just speaking about it. And because I thought I knew the CEO, and then it turns out you've just been in the role for about a year,
Yeah.
a bit more than a year.
It'll be a year in, like, 2 weeks from now.
Oh,
Yeah, I
wow.
know.
Mazal
I
tov.
was number 2 for the whole time,
Okay.
and before then, I was a number 2 elsewhere, so I was, like, a number 2 for 18 years, and
Okay.
then this is the first time I've been number 1, El
Yeah.
Presidente,
Okay. Yeah.
so
New administration, new
exactly,
new management. Okay.
exactly.
So, what is the Philos Project for those that don't know?
Well, I would say the most easy way to say it is we encourage Christian support for Israel and the Jewish people.
Right. But
Under
it is like a broader, right? You have like a broader mission.
Yeah, we do have a broader mission, but it is we focus actually
Jews
on.
wouldn't love the word mission, probably.
Yeah,
But yeah.
we engage what I would call like almost like affinity groups. So
Okay.
we have what we call Philos Latino, which engages
Right.
the Hispanic community, which is very vibrant.
Mhm.
We have Philos Catholic, which you might imagine gets the
Yeah, I saw that
Catholics,
on your
right?
site, by the way, when I was, like, doing homework. I
Right.
was like, "Oh, wow."
Right, and actually there's not very much work being done amongst Catholics, and most of the
Because
work that
people just assume that it's, like, terrible?
well, the focus has often been on, "Hey, let's get the evangelicals," and
Right.
so, it tends to ignore other groups within the Christian world,
Mhm.
and so the Catholics have just a different way of they have a different language
Right.
and a different called Christianese, if you will,
Mhm.
and so if you're not engaging them in the way they normally talk to
Right.
each
You
other.
can't speak to them like you speak to an evangelical
Right,
Christian.
and even evangelicals are all over the map too,
Yeah, definitely.
but
You have
there's
different shades
even more
of
different.
of
Right.
evangelical, yeah. And then but I think isn't, like, the mission statement something about
It promotes
persecution of
positive Christian engagement in the Near East.
in the
It
Near
was.
East,
Yeah,
right.
and so, like, we were started ISIS was on the prowl,
Mhm.
and there was a lot of persecution, a real emphasis on
Yeah.
the persecution of Christians,
Mhm.
particularly in Iraq, and they had nowhere to go, there was no
Right.
refugee camps for them, and nobody seemed to care, and so we did a lot of work on the persecuted Christian
Mhm.
issue, but after October 7th, we found that we really had to kind of narrow in on the support for Israel and Jewish
Oh, really? So,
people.
like, so in a sense, kind of like many, I guess, Jewish organizations or even Israeli institutions, you had to redefine or maybe refocus.
Yeah, I would say refocused,
Okay.
because I mean, it's not that I don't care about Christians of the region.
Yeah.
It's just that like
No, but every organization can, like, or any individual could care about a lot of things, but you have to, those like me who have ADHD are very all over the place. But we teach ourselves, okay, focus on only you can't do
right,
everything. You can't.
and,
You can't
and
do everything well.
right, and we do. I mean, we do raise the issues as they come up, and we do kind of focus. Particularly, we're excited about what's happening in Lebanon because of the collapse of Hezbollah,
Right.
and the Christians seem to have found their voice again and
Mhm.
found a little bit of muscle back in their
Yeah.
bodies. They had atrophied,
Right.
and that's
It's a
very
whole
exciting.
fascinating, like,
Right, and then there's the issue of Christians in Syria. They had aligned
yeah,
themselves with Assad,
right.
which now
Is not a
that
good
is
thing.
not a good thing at all,
Right.
and their communities. I mean, one of the things that happened when HTS ended up taking most of the cities of
Of
Syria,
Syria.
they a lot of the Christian cemeteries were destroyed and that kind of
Oh,
thing.
wow.
So it's not a good sign for
Right.
the direction of things in the future. There's
It
issues.
actually relates to many Israeli, officials, leadership, defense. They'll say, we don't get it why the Western world is so excited about Ashara being, running Syria now, wearing a suit, like he's a terrorist.
Exactly.
And, like this is not like a golden era
It's not
of,
they did not arrive at a golden era in
yeah,
Syria. I think that I advocated for what I called the controlled balkanization of Syria. It needs to
okay.
be broken up
Yeah,
because, like, it was smashed together, a bunch of people that did not wanna live together,
right.
and so the
And
only
it
w
still is not all run by HTS,
100%,
right? So it's
100%.
still got its,
And so I said, "Well, let's break up Syria and let's like the Northeast is Kurdish Christian.
yeah.
Then there has to be a place for the Alawites to go because
Hmm.
there are 3 million people and they're
Right.
obviously now under the
Good luck
gun.
to them.
And then there's the Druze, and then it's
Yeah.
it's a whole variety,
Right.
and so, allowing it to break apart. I mean, the
Yeah.
war in the Balkans to, the war of Yugoslavia
Mhm.
was the war to keep it together, not break it
Yeah.
apart.
So our
Uh,
our podcast producer, Yuval, has a very big interest in this
okay,
type of, thing. So
oh,
we're gonna connect
okay,
you guys afterwards.
excellent.
He's gonna follow up with you.
That's
Okay. So you guys came to Israel now, and we just, like, actually ran into some, uh, press release announcement that you were visiting somewhere, and we're like, "Okay, they're
mhm.
interesting. Let's try and reach out." And we
Yeah,
Yuval reached out to you. And I think it's interesting for us because, you know, most of us in Israel and also Jews, right? So most of our readers in the Jerusalem Post are actually in the U.S.
yeah.
Most of them Jews, a lot of them evangelicals as well, but they don't totally get it. I feel like maybe now with the Trump administration and seeing the support, I think during the war in Israel and like the statements, I feel like maybe something has shifted when it comes to the Jewish. I wouldn't even say embrace, but maybe acceptance, right? At the
Yeah,
moment,
I wouldn't say it's quite embraced yet.
right?
It is like, "Oh, wow, you were the only ones left after all our allies that we thought
Right.
were existed didn't turn up."
So I'm wondering since, you, like, I mean, I'm sure, like, you're in New York and,
I am.
like, you're surrounded by Jew you know what I'm saying? Like, you live
Yeah.
uh, like, you eat
I
chicken soup every other day or something.
I do spend a lot of time with Jews.
Yeah.
So I don't think I knew any Jews until 2011. So I'm
Okay.
actually
Wait,
pretty
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Seattle area, but if
Okay.
I knew Jews, I didn't know they were Jews.
Right.
'Cause
Right.
it's a
It
lot
actually
of
has an interesting, I
Northern
think, like, a
European.
Sephardic,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't know any Jews. I
Right.
came to Israel the first time in 2012.
Okay.
This is, I think, my 41st trip since then. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I come
Whoa.
a lot.
Whoa.
But I would say the last year since the war, it really has changed. This kind of Jewish
The
Christian
dynamic,
relations
yeah.
is at a whole new level than it was before.
Right. So, like, when you meet with, let's say, either a secular or like a liberal American Jew, and let's say before October 7th,
Right.
right? Like, were you surprised that, like, you were the one possibly saying, "Oh, Israel, Bible, this is the Jews, whatever," like, not getting into, I don't know, the Palestinian state and stuff, and then them being the opposite,
Yeah, I would describe
or,
before
on a
October
spectrum,
7th, I would describe I described antisemitism in the States as on the left,
right?
it was I love Jews and hate Israel,
Mhm.
and on the right, it was I love Israel and hate Jews.
Right, interesting, okay.
Right? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I found that actually when I engage with people, that
yeah,
was the division because most Jews in the United States are progressive
right,
and most Christians in the United States are conservative.
right,
And so when they would meet, the issue they engaged on was often politics.
yeah,
And I mean, I remember meeting with a Reform rabbi in outside of Atlanta,
okay.
and he was complaining about the fact that the local school board had passed a resolution against anti-Semitism, and he didn't like the resolution.
Oh,
And
wow.
so he was giving them a hard time about the resolution. And I'm
Yeah,
like, and he was going on those white Christian men, those white Christian men. And I was a little bit, I was like,
take it
dude,
back.
first of all, I'm a white Christian man. So,
Right.
but it became really clear if you are one of those white Christian men that was on that school board and pushing for this resolution, and the
That there may be
local
some issue with it.
and then the local rabbi comes and gives you a hard time, you're like, well, what, like what?
But was
It
there a reason? Maybe like a political,
it
like, statement within it or
it
something?
had well, it had some. It was very pro-Israel, and
Okay.
it like had a very strong
Yeah,
like kind of Zionist bent to it. And
right.
he was just, he didn't like it.
Yeah,
And my sense was, if you were one of those white Christian men and you tried to do this good thing, and then the Jews are coming at you for it, it
right.
doesn't take long for a political division
Mhm,
to turn to them Jews,
mhm,
right? Especially if you don't know very many.
right.
And so I found that my effort on the left was often trying to let's talk about Israel because that seems to be the rub. And for the right, the issue with let me introduce you to my Jewish
Jewish
friend
friend, yeah,
who's conservative.
yeah,
There's not a lot of them, so
yeah.
it was a
There's a
harder,
bit of a growth, but
yeah,
not
but
not dramatic, no.
not dramatic and
Yeah,
not
not
in
in numbers.
well not in numbers and not in a lot of places where there are a lot of
That is
Christians.
true, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so,
They're in very
you know,
specific areas.
because thing was like
The Jews are, by the way, on the right, on the extreme sides,
yes,
geographically,
yeah,
and the
they're
evangelicals are kind of in the
in the
middle.
middle, right?
Yeah.
And the thing was is that it was easy to Israel for a lot of Christians is like Narnia or Hogwarts.
Yeah.
It's like imaginary land,
Yeah.
and so they can project onto it a lot of different things. And so what I found was
Narnia. I like that.
let me
Okay.
introduce you to my Jewish friend who thinks a lot like you. And what that would do was it removes the possibility of stereotyping. Well,
Mhm.
not maybe the possibility, but it undermines it.
Yeah.
Why?
When
Because
you get to know someone, you
exactly.
can't
You
you
can't
can't right. When
destroy
it's
the
in your
whole
head, it
people.
could be a bunch of things. When it's in
Exactly.
front of you,
Yeah. And so it was for me to introduce people to the thing that was where the resistance was.
mhm.
And so but after October 7th, lots changed.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, and you mentioned this kind of like half a sentence, and I think that's really the core of what's going on now. Is many people, as you said, most American Jews are liberal, right? I mean, according to the recent Pew surveys, let's say somewhere between 10 to 12% are Orthodox,
Mhm.
and the rest are a bunch of other
Right.
things. And most of those who are Orthodox are Republicans, and those who are not are
Right.
Democrats or
I
somewhere
mean,
in
you're
between.
like at
So
70% probably.
yeah,
70% of Jews
at least, yeah.
are at least, maybe
Right.
75,
So
right?
then many Jews reached a point where, okay, they were fighting for minorities because Jews, though are, many of them are well off and have been in the US for many, my family, I've been living here since I was a kid, but my family was living in the US 4 generations back, right?
Right.
So many of us, American Jews, let's say, living in America for such a long time, but still being a minority, and then, trying to help immigration or unions and stuff
Right.
like that, where actually many Jews actually established these unions. Um, and then suddenly their allies, people they see as allies, and it started a bit before with like the George Floyd,
Right.
the Black Lives Matter, where people wanted to come, let's say, with a Jewish symbol, and like they were not allowed, or an
Right.
Israeli flag,
Or the women's
or
march
the dyke, yeah,
also
yeah, yeah, yeah.
ran into issues of
Right, you'd
that
have like an Israeli flag with like the LGBTQ whatever
colors.
colors,
Yeah.
and they were not allowed to
Exactly.
participate in a
Yeah, yeah.
very violent way. And then after October 7th, it was like boom,
Right.
right? Like these people don't want to speak to me. I'm a Zionist, right? Someone who does not see themselves as a Zionist, or maybe does, but like didn't have enough of didn't devote time to it, is singled out, and then what do?
No, several of my particularly my LGBT friends were telling me how hard it was after October 7th.
Wow,
And they
the
would say
Jews,
the Jews, and they would say, "Luke, you have no idea." And I would say, "You're right. I don't have any idea."
right?
But like, I have one friend who was regularly invited to the national conference on LGBT rights and then
Okay,
and oftentimes one of the plenary speakers and very welcomed in. And after October 7th, he was not only he was disinvited, but they also passed out keffiyehs and chanted from the river to the sea at the event,
right.
right? So
Because it makes a
it,
lot of sense.
100%.
So much.
It makes a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is this alliance on the left that formed between the Islamists and the Marxists
Right.
that
The red,
the red
green.
green alliance.
Yeah.
It just it it was really problematic for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and people saw that, and so then you had the Christians are like, yeah, we're against those people too, and so you had this
Right.
strange suddenly affinity that formed from people that typically would not see
Right.
Christians as allies suddenly did.
Right. So can you give me an example of like a friend of yours who maybe wasn't, or not a friend, I don't know, someone you met who was not very accepting towards evangelicals and maybe has made that shift, or
I mean,
or
I have
like
so many. Well, actually, I'll give a great example. In January of 23, I had a guy walk into my office with a check for $18,000 saying, you're the only allies that stood with us."
wow.
And it like put the check on the table, and I
That's
haven't
such
heard
a
from him
Jewish
since. I know,
thing. Oh my god.
but it was like it was.
When did you realize, by the way, that 18 or
I well,
36 or
I've been in
36 is
this
a
for
number?
a decade now, so
Okay, okay.
I knew it,
Well,
but
some
it
of my parents' friends gave me $18 for my bar mitzvah present. That was like Dude,
Come on, yeah, all
36.
right,
Give me
right.
36.
No, but I, you know, I met somebody recently who worked with the ADL, and they got to get some questions straight off the bat. They will sit you with
When they
you
meet
for
you.
coffee,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
first time, and they tend to be they're
Right.
secular, and they know I'm
Very
I'm very
religious.
very Christian,
Yeah.
and they go, so what do you want? Right? Like if you open the door for them, I'm unoffendable, so it's very helpful. I'm
Yeah.
like the safe Christian they can ask all their questions
Yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
And one of the things what do you want with us? Like, what's your intent? Like,
Right.
don't you just want us to go back to Israel and die in the apocalypse or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
And I tell them, well, there is a story in the Bible where the Jews go to the land and they're surrounded by the nations and the nations are coming against them and
Right.
God saves them. It just happens to be in the book of Zechariah,
Yeah.
which is in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's just like it's not actually in our part. Like nowhere in the New Testament does it say that.
Right.
And so there is a projection onto Christians that they just want us to go back to the land and die in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
No, no, that's I don't know anybody who thinks that way
Right.
and
Or understands it.
or understands it. And there are, obviously Christians that want to convert Jews and want them to become
Yeah.
Christians, but there's a lot of us that are fine with Jews being Jews.
Yeah.
And it's
Or even
once you get
sometimes want them to be even more.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
I was asked. I've done a lot of pro Israel, pro Jewish advocacy. I mean, I started a thing called the Philos Action League. So
Okay.
anytime there was an anti-Semitic incident anywhere in the United States, I had a Christian show up at that location with a bouquet of white roses and a
Mhm.
card saying, "We're Christians and we stand in friendship and solidarity with you."
Okay.
And we showed up at hundreds of places across
Wow.
America,
Wow.
and we started that in 21
Okay.
because I showed up at an anti-Israel rally, expecting to stand with Jews and found myself to be standing alone. And
Wow.
I had a little sign that I had written, "I stand with Israel and Jews." So on one side of the fence was like 250 anti-Israel people, and on the other side of the fence was me.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you
Okay.
know what? Next time I need to bring some
I'd love
more,
to see that picture.
some more. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to have more people with me. So I
Right.
started mobilizing Christians to, hey, let's just take a stand
Right.
and physically show up. And we had hundreds and hundreds of Christians
So
everywhere.
so how many, like, employees do you have or volunteers or people that you work with
Right. So
in
I have
advocacy?
I have a staff of 20.
Okay.
And I have volunteers all over the country. I
Mhm.
mean, we launched this thing in the fall called Generation Zion,
Okay.
which is to engage Gen Z.
Right.
And we signed up over the last about 8 weeks. We signed up about 500 Gen Z
Wow.
kids. I call them kids. I'm old like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. From
Gen Z
across the
kids.
US.
No, in Dallas alone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay. So it's
just
like a pilot?
it's a pilot. I tested it out. I had a theory of change, let's say,
Okay.
and it worked.
Yeah.
And I was not promising a trip. I wasn't promising, hey, this,
You didn't ask them to convert
I
500 Jews.
I didn't there was no strings attached to it
Okay.
because that's also was my test.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because listen,
People don't wanna commit.
you can get people do anything if you say, hey, if you do this for me, I'll take you to Israel. I mean,
Yeah, okay.
that's a
Well, I
you
don't know,
know,
during war, I don't know, but yeah, okay.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's
Well, my
easy to
experience with
get
American kids was, "Wait, can this give me can I put it on my resume, or will it give me, points for stuff like
No,
that?" Yeah.
but in Dallas, there's an overpass in Dallas. I think it's I-75 or something like that, in which there was like pro-Hamas people on the overpass every Saturday,
Wow.
and the shul was on one side and the Orthodox community on the other side. So the walking path, they either had to walk past these people,
Yeah.
kind of catcall them and doing whatever, and so we mobilized a show of force and they had like 3 people and we had 50
Wow.
with American and Israeli flags, and it was Christians and Jews
Mhm.
basically saying, "No, we're taking back this bridge."
Right.
And so now they had those poor Hamas people had to watch us as we outnumbered them greatly.
Okay.
But that's the kind of stuff
As
that
by the way, as Jews, right, we'll always be we're a small
you
nation,
are.
and in Christianity is
We got a lot.
is
We
like
got a
thousands of
couple
percent
billion of
more.
us.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's it and but what's frustrating, I'll
And there's lots
honest
of Muslims.
yeah. But honestly, to me, the issue is that I had expected a lot more Christians to show up.
And not enough.
They were terrible. I would say that, I was appalled, and by the response of Christians to what happened on October 7th.
Really?
Yeah,
You're
because
surprising me. Okay.
I expected there were supposed to be millions
Well,
of
by the way,
us.
yeah, so we see anecdotal, like,
There's millions of
event
us,
yeah, okay.
right?
Well, you were saying billions, but yeah.
Well, yes, billions, but
Well,
like
hundreds of millions and just, like, how many in
listen,
the US?
listen, like I would say, let's say in the U.S. there's 100 million
Okay.
Christians, okay,
Okay.
but in the Dallas area, there's a couple million at least.
Okay.
I mean, and so I went to Dallas after October 7th in like
Mhm.
December, and I
Right.
said, like, guys, like where were you? What
So
did you
you're
do?
not you're what you're saying is, you're not preaching to the choir, like, you actually have to educate.
I not only educate, but get them out. I
Right.
mean, it's one thing to be
Well,
like,
they won't go out if they're not
if
educated.
you're pulled on a, somebody calls you up and like, you support Israel? Yeah, I love Israel, but it's Narnia
Right.
again,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm like, but will you show up for
Right.
Jews
Mhm.
on the street with a flag?
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
what I
That's more
want.
difficult, yeah.
It is, but of a million, man, can I get 10%,
Right.
1%,
Okay.
5%? Like what? And so I began to build what, because I got really frustrated
Okay.
because I expected more.
Mhm.
Philos was started, we were like the spec ops
I love it how
guys.
we're always more critical towards our own groups. No, because, like, I was not I was thinking to myself, "Wow," we see in our, the news agencies, Reuters, where we see
Right.
the photos of, like, this rally, that rally,
Yeah.
but you're saying it's, like, very anecdotal, it's not big enough,
It's
it's not powerful enough.
I helped organize the largest Christian majority march in the United States
Okay.
after October 7th, and it was outside Columbia University. I
We've
got
heard of it.
a
You write about it
yeah,
occasionally.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I had been asked, like, "Can you help us organize a rally?" And they said, "Well, we really need, like, 500." I was
Okay.
like, "I haven't been able to get 500 people to do anything since the war,
Okay.
but let me try."
Okay.
And so I gathered some people who I knew could get a following going,
Yeah.
and I figured I could get a couple hundred, and I knew Patricia Heaton could get a couple hundred, and I know this guy Sean Foy, I knew he could get a couple hundred. I was like, "Okay, that would give me at least 500."
Okay.
We had 5,000 show up.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it was
Wow.
really cool because it was
When
almost,
was this?
this was
During the
April
encampments?
April of last yeah,
Yeah,
during the
yeah, yeah,
encampment,
yeah.
and it was a moment when honestly, I'm standing on the corner. We had walked completely around the campus,
Okay.
like we were marching Jericho, and we didn't have trumpets. We did have a guitar.
Right.
But I was staring down one stretch, one long avenue,
Mhm.
and there was, as far as I could see, Israel and American flags, and then I looked the other way, and as far as I could see, Israel and American flags, and I actually kinda burst in tears for a second because
Wow.
I was like, I expected the 500. I didn't expect the
Yeah.
5,000. And then we did it again in LA. I had 2,000 in LA, but LA is harder to mobilize people.
Yeah. In
And
general.
and and then, I pulled the permit for the mall for
Okay.
October 7th. I pulled the permit in May because I
For
figured
2024?
for in 2024 because I figured,
Yeah.
the Hamas, if I was thinking like Hamas, I would pull the permit and have a
Right.
big anti-Israel rally on October
Okay.
7th on
That's
the mall.
smart.
And so I was like, I'm gonna get that.
Okay.
And so I organized a big event on the mall. We had like 60 partners, half were Jewish, half were not Jewish. JD Vance came and spoke.
Yeah.
But my numbers were not great. I mean, I had 12,000 RSVP, but I had only like 2,000 show up.
Oh, wow.
And well, part of it was because the Secret Service got involved and they
Mhm.
made a giant area that you couldn't get in very easily.
Right.
And then they shut the gate at 12 o'clock and
Oh,
it was
wow.
supposed to start at 12. So they kind of messed up my
Mm.
numbers a bit. But nonetheless, I still don't think 12,000 is enough
Right.
when I got millions.
Yeah.
And so it became clear
Or
to me,
18,000,000.
whatever, I
No,
just
I'm just
need
saying
some. I
18.
just, there you
The high, the high.
no, but I want more.
Okay.
And
We want more.
there you go.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's we're in a new season
Mhm.
because fortunately one of the great gifts that Hamas gave was they didn't limit themselves to the Jew. Right?
Right.
They went
That is
after the
true.
Christmas tree
Yeah.
celebrations. They started. I mean, they targeted Christians
Right.
too.
Yeah.
And so by doing so, it became very easy for me to then make the case
Mhm.
that this is not just against the Jews,
Right.
that it's against people who believe the Bible is true,
Mhm.
and which is true what it is,
Right.
because
Well, it's also against the West and the US.
but the West is rooted in the Bible.
Okay.
I mean, we like
Right.
things like the value of civil disobedience,
Right.
which we all practice, and it's
Mhm.
very common. And it's a very,
Yeah.
we like. Where does that come from? The Hebrew Bible.
Mhm.
It comes from the midwives of who were
Yeah.
helping in the Exodus, and then early part of the book of Exodus,
Yeah.
and then in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, we only know the names of what four people in the book of Daniel. It's those three guys and Daniel.
Right.
Right? Because everybody else was a bunch of wimps, but those guys
Yeah.
were like, we're like
I don't know
we're
about the lions.
yeah, the lions. They were
Yeah.
named. Yeah. But yeah, you have this to me, you have a very great opportunity to like really drive home that there is
Right.
a red green alliance that is against the people who believe the Bible is
Sure.
true, and because the Bible is the blueprint for humanity.
Mhm.
I mean, there is a one of my favorite verses in the Hebrew Bible says that the nations shall go up to the mountain of the Lord. They will learn of the God of Jacob. Law will go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord to the ends of the earth. And then it says, and then God will judge between nations, and they'll turn their swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. To me, that's the model of peace. How do you get to world peace? Well, according to Isaiah, it's by going up to Zion, learning learning of this book, this blueprint,
Mhm.
learning from not only the place but the people who brought it. And then when you do that, then God will transform the nations, and then we won't have. That to
So
me is
so
a
so you guys
picture.
actually came here now, right?
Yeah,
What is it
yeah.
called? There's a
Conference of Christian Presidents for Israel.
okay. Which is like is it
It's
so
like modeled after your Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations.
very
Okay?
good. You
Yeah,
said that long
yeah.
name very in a very precise way,
Yeah,
right?
I've said it several times.
Right. So for those who don't know the Jewish alphabet soup, it's basically a Jewish organization, which is an umbrella in a sense of it, an umbrella of the organizations, and like the presidents or CEOs of those organizations are in this forum called the Conference of Presidents. So is
Yeah.
this a new? It's a new initiative.
It's a new initiative, and
Kind
it
of cool.
and the goal is
How many
to
organizations are members?
so we had a launch in the US in September, and we had
Okay.
about 70 organizations join us,
Wow. Okay.
and then
And the potential is probably like
hundreds and hundreds,
yeah.
hundreds and hundreds. Because here's the thing: is that there are groups that groups like this, but they tend to be where the
According to a specific type of
well, it's
or a certain leader, maybe.
certain leader, but it's also the Christian Zionist organizations come together, right? Or
Right.
the ones that are already where Israel is a major part of their
Okay. Yeah,
portfolio.
yeah, yeah.
Those ones there's been groups that have formed them,
Okay.
okay? But what we wanna we're kind of expanding the tent
Okay.
because there's a lot of organizations where they don't have Israel as a portfolio piece,
Okay.
something they're advocating for,
Well, like, it makes sense
but
in
they're
their
but
ideals,
exactly.
theoretically.
They are
Okay.
pro-Israel. If you ask them,
Right.
they'd be
But do
very
they know enough? Probably not.
right. And
Okay.
and so, I mean, we had here, Ralph Reed, who runs who used to run the Christian Coalition, but Faith and Freedom.
Mhm.
They got 3 million members,
Wow.
and he's often speaking on media and in the
That's
news, and
such an interesting thing how these pastors or religious leaders, evangelicals are first of all, their following is huge.
yes.
And, like, there was just this conference, the R&B, the
Yeah, our National Religious Broadcaster.
exactly.
Yeah, I was there.
One day I'll go. It sounds
It's
like a
amazing. You
it
should
sounds kinda like a candy shop, you
yeah,
know?
for pro-Israel people or Israel people or, like, the media
Well, for
people,
media, yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's where you have to be. I mean,
right.
everybody
Because
is.
it's interesting because we think like, okay, it's like a religious network, and then like, yeah, but they have like hundreds of millions of viewers
Yeah,
or followers, and then all these, many, very charismatic leaders who have a huge following on social media
right, and that's
or
where and
stadiums. Someone just show me like there's it's not a church, I don't know if it's a church or whatever, but like it's a stadium.
yeah,
It's a stadium, and like that's where they come every Saturday,
or
every
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah, yeah.
20,000 people or
Yeah,
something. Like,
yeah.
what?
Yeah, no, it's not unusual to have a 20,000
That's
person
that's
church
that's
in America.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not super usual, but the
Yeah,
largest
yeah, yeah,
ones
but, like,
are.
it exists. Yeah.
And it exists, and the thing is, so you have
Trying to think of
these
synagogues
leaders.
that big. I can't think of any.
No, I can't either,
Yeah.
actually. No, but you have these points where you have these leaders who are pro-Israel, but and that speak regularly. They have their own shows, they have their own podcasts, they're
Yeah.
speaking almost every day. And so how are they gonna talk about Israel? What are the
Right.
issues that they're gonna
Right.
drive? And they're so busy and they're so swamped with stuff.
Right.
So we our model is somewhat like what conferences
It's so
of
interesting.
presidents of
Because
Jewish organizations.
since the war started, I've been doing more interviews for like American outlets, and then there's a certain person, I'm not going to mention his name, from Fox, who has me on a lot, um, and he knows a lot about everything going on here. And at a certain point, I was like, "So how many times have you been to Israel?" It's like, "Actually, never." Never. Now, this is the most pro-Israel person. He has some sort of like a military understanding and background. So like he knows about like everything going on, but like he hasn't been here.
Right.
And maybe also it's also because people are like, okay, like we don't need to approach these because they know, right?
Right.
But
They might
you
not.
can't yeah, like you can't know
Yeah.
enough if you don't physically visit a place, right? We know
Right.
from COVID where people tried to like, if you're in your home, you're in your home. You may be able to like have a meeting or speak to someone, but you're not gonna feel anything.
Right. No, and I mean, the only reason I've come back now 40 times since the first time I came is because coming to this land, it got under my skin.
Mhm.
I came twice last year,
Mhm.
and it was like I felt like a house plant that hadn't been watered, Like
Wow.
it's like it gets back, revives me,
Yeah.
and I get back to it. But there's a bunch of yeah, like I said, there's a bunch of these pastors, these leaders, these Christian leaders
Yeah.
where they're
Their
pro-Israel,
heart's in the right place, but they
but
just don't
they
know.
just don't know,
And
and
then
they don't know what to say,
right.
and so I provide them the issues that we're gonna do, the things that we're gonna focus on, and, I so walking out of here are kind of top 3 things that we're gonna start dealing with this current administration, and we're gonna
Mhm.
push these things, is the extension of sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. It's a very popular thing amongst Christians. I don't know what it's like amongst Jews. I know I can predict it, but nonetheless, amongst the Christians, it's where the heat is, honestly,
Yeah.
and it's actually surprising to me. But then we learned while being here about the Israeli deep state and its connection to the
Okay.
American one. Like
Yeah.
the amount of USAID money and money comes from the State Department to undermine
Mhm.
the Israeli government, to hamstring this and like
You have
it was
examples?
yeah, there was something like, we were told
'Cause I
120,000,000,
saw different, like, contradicting reports. That's why I don't know.
120,000,000 shekels was spent on the judicial reform,
But that's,
like
like, proven, like, USA
yeah, yeah,
really?
yeah, it's coming out. It's coming out. We
Okay.
there was a, Elon, basically retweeted or made a quote tweet on a deep like, basically a list of some stuff coming out of Israel,
Okay. Interesting.
this last week.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it seems to be, quite evident
So
there.
with regard to sovereignty, I think it's interesting. I just had a
Yeah, yeah.
conversation with our diplomatic reporter today, and I think the Republican Party in general is, like, pushing for this.
Yeah.
I don't know if the administration is necessarily going in that direction.
I don't know if
'Cause,
the
like, there was that opportunity in the first round, didn't happen for,
very
whatever.
exclusive. Yeah, yeah.
Listen, Abraham Accords is something that is, I in a sense, it's kind of like no one here or anywhere could have imagined that would happen,
Yeah.
right?
No, and that is there's several kind of complexities to this, how, if the choice is Saudi Arabia or being part of the Abraham Accords or, extension of
Sovereignty?
sovereignty, what does Israel do?
What
Uh,
would you, go
oh,
with?
I think, well, depends on
Not
who you
you.
ask. Me,
What are, like, what's the vibe?
the vibe is sovereignty.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is so again, I'm a little surprised this is where the energy is.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it.
Okay.
And I'm like, I'm
I
along
mean, it
for the
makes
ride
sense
some of this.
if you're biblical. then
Yes.
it's just like it's there,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Uh,
And the thing was, like, Jerusalem was such the push for so long,
right.
and once that box got checked, like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? So it seems to be this is the next thing. And then Iran obviously is a big deal,
Mhm.
but Iran's going to be a challenge because of the growing isolationist wing on the
Mhm.
Republican Party that's
Yeah.
not going to want to see, another foreign war
Yeah.
or even kind of language
And
in that
even President
direction.
Trump kind of said, "I would meet with him, I would
Right. Right.
whatever." I mean, yes, sanctioning, which is
Right. And
legit.
so I think they're wanting to let the maximum pressure campaign
Okay.
take its toll
Okay.
and see where that goes.
Yeah.
But we're also running out of time to keep Iran from getting a
Right.
nuke. So there's a lot of, so, those three issues are the three issues we're going to kind of
Fascinating.
bring to the administration, bring
Right.
to Congress. There is a lot of excitement, a lot of energy still and support for Israel. That's
Yeah.
strong, but there is you do have, the noisy pro-Hamas people. They're going to keep kind of doing
Yeah.
their thing, but I'm also particularly concerned about the right now.
Mhm.
There is a growing problem, and I see it, and
The
I'm hearing it.
isolationist,
But it's not just the isolationists. It's like I was with somebody a couple weeks ago, and they're like, "But Luke, don't you know that? Like, here's the 10 Jews who want to take away your guns, and here's the
oh, wow. Like
and
the
like the
classic antisemitism.
Right,
Okay.
and, like, and Pornhub was started by a Jew,
Right.
and my response is, "Well, have you
Well,
checked
Kanye
out?"
West
Well,
and
yeah,
yeah, I don't know if that's right. I don't know what it is. Okay.
but that's not where but that's a little bit different because it's like they're going after these progressive Jews become the model of America's problems
Right.
according to the
George
right,
Soros,
all that
etcetera.
stuff,
Yeah.
and so I've said to them, "Well, have you tried out, I mean, have you looked into the Irish?" Right? Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like, how bad are they? What do
Yeah.
they run?
Yeah.
Because if you're obsessing about the Jews, then it's classic antisemitism. But
Right.
that voice is rising, particularly among some of the
On the right.
on the
Yeah.
among the young men. And so that's
Yeah.
one of the areas where I've got a lot of
You
focus,
have a lot of
and
work to do.
I do, but because I got these leaders who are also kind of
Yeah.
ready to go on this. The goal is to create, a nice big seawall. So when that wave of anti-Semitism comes from the right, it hits something really
Wow.
hard, and
Wow.
and we won't we it will fall apart.
Yeah.
That's my
So,
expectation.
unfortunately, our time is up, but, like, this was really fascinating, and I think one thing I mean, first of all, I appreciate everything that you do, but I think the fact that, it's not black and white, meaning you're able to look at your own camp and criticize it,
Yeah,
but also say, "Listen," again, you don't have to tell me if you're a Republican or a Democrat, right? I mean,
I'm
it's kind of I mean,
I'm Republican.
I know, I'm
I'm
just
a guy on the
saying,
right. I'm
I
a
was
guy on
always
the
told, like, my parents were like, "You don't ask Americans who they vote for." I guess it's before
yeah,
Trump,
yeah,
right? I don't know. Anyways, no, but I'm saying, a lot of people just be like, "Everything's perfect." But no, there are extremes,
yeah.
and the extremes are usually not good,
Well,
right?
yeah, we
So,
gotta
yeah.
fight them. We gotta fight them.
Yeah. So that's I think it's
Wherever
amazing.
I get Philos means friend in
Okay.
Greek, and so the goal is, hey, I'm going to stand with my friends against my enemies.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Luke.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, and you don't have to say my name because my name is really complicated
Wait,
for those who are not. Zvika,
I was
Zvika.
going there. I was
It's
getting there.
difficult.
It
It's
was.
so difficult. Yeah. Anyways, thank you so
Of
much.
course, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.